Hey everybody, this is Rob at the Body Project Studio, and I'm here with a very special and a fantastic student, Nikki. So, what I wanted to talk about is why so many fitness and therapy programs do not get the ideal results. And Nikki is a perfect story. And why don't you tell everybody why you came in the first place? What kind of you were dealing with?
Yep. So 4 years ago or so, I had finished running a marathon. I was, doing a lot of running. I went to just an exercise class, did squats, and I pulled something in my hip. And then since then, I just always had this hip pain, and I stopped running. I thought for years, like if I just stopped running, it would just kind of go away. I got pregnant, had my baby.
So the hip pain was high into the hip that
Yeah.
you were experiencing?
Yeah, hip, glute
Okay.
area.
So here's what happens with a lot of people is they think that by actually just giving it time, it's going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So Nikki had the hip pain before she actually got pregnant, and then thought because why you weren't running.
Yeah, I thought, well, I was pregnant, I wasn't going to be running anymore, so
Right.
I thought 9 months off of running for sure would
Yeah.
fix my issue that I felt mostly when I was running.
Right. So here's what happens a lot of times is people will develop these muscle imbalances. Nikki has a job where she's sitting a lot, and so what happens is people will develop these postural distortions, or the muscles become unbalanced. And what happens is then when she's doing an exercise program, like say for instance running, she's not able to load the force evenly. And so what happens is her gait, her pattern is altered, and then she starts stressing a hip. And so what happened with Nikki, particularly then after she got pregnant, is her deep abdominal wall was not functioning optimally. Nikki was also a vertical breather, and so when she would breathe, instead of breathing through her diaphragm, she was breathing vertically. And so when we talk about some of the things that we had to do with you was we had to restore your respiratory patterns, get you breathing through your diaphragm, and then we had to start working and exercising her deep abdominal wall. Now the interesting thing about Nikki, and this is why she was a great model for this particular episode, is why don't you tell everyone what your history is before you started getting into fitness? You were really focused on what?
Martial arts.
Okay, so what kind of martial arts did you do?
I did Taekwondo and I did Harundo,
Okay,
ancient Korean martial art. Very comprehensive, very much focused on mind, body, spirit. Just there's a lot of discipline, a lot of practice makes perfect, a lot of repetition and mastery.
repeat that word. There was what?
Mastery.
Mastery. This is the number one thing that I see that really is wrong with therapy today and also fitness programs is nobody is focusing on mastery. And so consequently what happens is people are going through the motions and they get substandard results. And so what really connected to Nikki is as we started to go through this process is there's a lot of minutia, right, involved, a lot of integral processes. Number one, we had to restore how she was breathing, and then secondly, we had to be very mindful of the exercises. And what Nikki found out, and like many of our clients find out, is if they're not really paying attention to the details, they're not going to get the same results, right? So what we really had to do is refine Nikki's skills. So let's lie you down, Nikki, and we'll kind of go through the process of what we did. So again, one of the first things that we see, whether it's fitness or whether it's therapy, is things really get commercialized, they get watered down, they become bastardized. And what happens is, again, people start going through the motions, and they just are never going to get the results that they would typically want to see. And so Nikki was a vertical breather, and when you're a vertical breather, now another thing we didn't talk about is Nikki also had a shoulder issue. And so when you're a vertical breather, you're gonna have a tendency to be tight through here, your upper neck musculature, and then you are going to tend to internally rotate your shoulder. So when your posture changes, then you have a greater propensity for now shoulder problems. So she had shoulder problems and she was having hip problems. And so one of the number one things we have to look at is restoring how she was breathing. Or if you're dealing with a low back, if you're dealing with a hip, you're dealing with a shoulder problem, a neck problem, a jaw problem, the first thing we want to look at is how are you breathing? So the first thing we did is we took her from being a vertical breather, breathing primarily through her chest, to now breathing through her diaphragm. Now remember, the diaphragm is your primary respiratory muscle, but it's also a secondary spinal stabilizer. And so if you're breathing properly through your diaphragm, your low back is very stable. And what was happening with Nikki is when she was running, her deep abdominal wall was not working optimally. She was a vertical breather, therefore she had no stabilization in this area. And so she was successfully loading this hip. So she was stressing that hip more. So the first thing we have to look at when someone is developing a pain pattern, if you've got any level of joint pain, it's generally because you have muscle imbalances. And remember, the muscles are designed to load the force. And so whether you're running, whether you're exercising in any capacity, the one thing we want to make sure is when we have harmony and balance with the musculature, now those muscles can load the force. If the muscles aren't loading the force, it's going to end up in the joint. So then what we started with Nikki is we started with very gentle, and all these exercises were extremely gentle, wouldn't you agree?
Very gentle.
So Nikki's got her fingers in her low back. If you take your belly button and wrap that around, she's putting pressure right at what would be the third lumbar. So it's right back here where Nikki's placing the pressure. And so all she's going to do is put pressure on her fingers, and she's going into this nice pelvic tilt. And by going into that pelvic tilt, she starts to strengthen these oblique muscles, these deep abdominal wall muscles. And so Nikki didn't have any problem when she first learned how to do the tilts. But where it really got tough for you was when we started to integrate. So a lot of times when it comes to therapy, when it comes to exercise, people work pretty good in isolation, but when they get into the integration, that's where it requires a lot more mindfulness. So like Nikki was talking about in her martial arts, she was very mindful and she was very, very focused on developing the skills. So when we were doing these type of exercises, she knew she could not go through the motions. So what happened when you went through the motions?
When I went through the motions, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, you didn't feel connected.
I didn't feel connected. I struggled. I shook more. I lost the stabilization.
Yeah. So what I think what really Nikki connected with was going back to when she was really mindful in her martial arts, that she felt during that time she was very connected. Then she got into running, and it was more of almost like an escapism, right? So you weren't really connected, but at the same time she also developed all these imbalances. And so this is a classic case that you can't just focus on one activity, i.e. running or aerobic activity. We have to couple that with flexibility and mobility and strength training to really have harmony and balance within the body. So what we did with Nikki is once we started to strengthen these abdominal muscles, then we separated her breathing. We just really focused on her breathing. And then what we did is what? We merged them, okay? And again, on Nikki's journey, and like most people, they really struggle when we start to integrate. And then we tilt, we're breathing, and then we start moving a leg. She demonstrated what a bend knee follow. So Nikki is tilting her pelvis. She's going to inhale. She'll drop her leg out, pause, and then bring it back on the exhale. Now, here's the beautiful thing, is when your abdominal wall is functioning at the level now Nikki's is, her muscles are contracting super tight the whole time. When most people start this type of work, number one, they struggle with integration of the breathing and the tilting, but then when they move a leg, that's when they really become disconnected and lose it. Well, here's the problem with the commoditization and the bastardization of fitness and therapy. When you go through the motions, you cannot be fully integrated, particularly if you've developed any type of injury or dysfunction. That's where your brain cannot connect with these muscles. And so remember, we really struggled when we first started. And I told Nikki, I said, you have to be in a really quiet space, right? So we could connect that mind-body. And then as she got more and more skilled, then we could add in more challenging exercises. But here's what happens with most therapeutic programs.
They can't find the muscle.
They can't find the muscle, right? So what happens a lot of times is people are kind of going through the motions, and then they go through level 1, watered down, level 2, more watered down, level 3. So they end up doing a level 4 exercise with very little proficiency. And so they go through a therapeutic program and they don't get the desired results. Or, say in fitness, people, because they're going through the motions, aren't really paying attention to building a skill, strengthening their foundation. What happens is people end up getting hurt. And this is why today so many people end up in physical therapy from doing fitness programs, because they never spend the time building the foundation. So, based on your experience, what is the number one thing you think that a person has to do really to optimize health and fitness?
I think that there needs to be intention behind every motion.
Okay, hopefully you guys
breath.
heard that. You need to have intention, and that is so beautifully said. You got to be very mindful. You got to set the intention. What else?
What else?
Just really building the foundation, right?
Oh yeah, perfecting your craft.
Perfecting the craft, right? Because you think about it this way: if we're building our dream home and we're thinking about the opulence of the dream home, but we build it on a crappy foundation, it's not going to last. Human body's no different. So what I want you guys to really take from the video is make sure that when you're exercising, whether it's in fitness or you're doing some level of therapy, don't go through the motions. Pay attention to the details, because really by focusing on the mastery and reclaiming mastery or total integration, that's how we're going to optimize results. So where are you with your progress so far?
So I've been here for like a month and a half or so.
Yep.
And I have like no more pain. So
No more pain.
That's really good.
And that is so beautiful. Here's why that happened. Number one, we really worked on skills and building the foundation, and she could not go to the next level until she mastered the previous level. So remember, don't be afraid to take a step back, to take 2 steps forward. So hopefully you got something from the video. If you learned something from the video, please go ahead and like the video. If you know a friend or family member who might be able to benefit from some of these fundamental principles, these foundational principles we talked about, please go ahead and share it. Till we see you later, go out and make it a great day. You certainly deserve it. Bye-bye.